I'm Jean Vincent Ridon, and today we will talk about Chenin Blanc from South Africa. Why Chenin Blanc from South Africa? Because if you've ever been drinking Chenin Blanc in your life, more than likely, or 50% of chances are that you've been drinking it coming from South Africa, because South Africa is the largest producer of Chenin Blanc in the world. They made it their national grapes. Chenin Blanc is a very old cultivar, originally coming from the Loire Valley. When I said an old cultivar, it means like any grape, they come from two parents, like Cabernet Sauvignon comes from Cabernet Franc and Sauvignon Blanc. Chenin Blanc, we try to find the parentage, the lineage of the grape, and we only could find one side of it, which is Savagnin from the Jura in the east of France, and the other parent is unknown. So it might be a grape that have disappeared a long time ago. So Chenin has been in history of winemaking since the 15th century, but many people believe it's been there from the 8th or 9th century for the simple reason that Chenin Blanc had many other names in the past. And even currently, when you look at Wikipedia, you can find up to 50 synonyms of Chenin Blanc. South Africa, they used to call it Steen, but we will come back on it a bit later. Why is it so many names for the same grape? Remember, this is not the 21st century. We go back to the 10th century. People didn't travel, and the grapes they were carrying from one place to the other, the vines, took local names. That's why so many synonyms, and the older the grape is, the more regional synonyms you will find. So Chenin Blanc, it's been identified as Chenin or Chener in the 15th century, but in the 17th century, in 1652, some of these cuttings might have been coming to South Africa with the first settlers, with Jan van Riebeeck, that was a commander of the 4th trading post we had in Cape Town, coming from the Netherlands. Coming in his boats were a few sticks, because, yeah, maybe you don't know, but this is how grapes propagate. You know, it's not seedlings and it's not living plant. If you want to transfer plant from one side of the world to the other one, it comes under this form. But now you can imagine that 16th century, we got no clue what you were carrying. There's no Bluetooth tagging, there's no barcode, there's no name, there's nothing written on it. So you put that in a barrel, you go across the world, and by the time you arrive in South Africa, they kind of all mix together. You have to wait until you plant, and to plant, you plant that in the ground, and after you plant that in the winter, then roots will start, and you will have a new plant of Chenin Blanc. So for long in South Africa, they actually believed it was a local cross, because grapes can cross-pollinate each other and create new breeds by seedlings this time, and nobody had proper records of the original grapes that were coming to the Cape. So for years, we had 3 grapes in South Africa. One was called France, which was actually Palomino. The other one was called Groendruif, which is Semillon. And the third one was Steen. And we had to wait until 1962 to properly identify that Steen was Chenin Blanc. For that, you need a science called ampelography. Ampelography is a science of identifying vines through the leaves, through the form of the bunches of the berries. It was much before DNA analysis, and that's how in 1962, what they used almost to call sometimes Chenin Blanc from the Loire Valley was actually Chenin Blanc, and since then you can put on the label in South African wine Steen or Chenin Blanc. So what happened to turn a few of these sticks into the national grape of South Africa? In history, I said it's 1652 or 1688. 1688 is the second arrival of settlers to Cape Town. They were Huguenots, French Huguenots, and they were fleeing French persecution for religious beliefs. They were Protestant. France was Catholic at that time, so they wanted to save their life, and they were offered the chance to come to South Africa to be given land, given a farm. So some of them brought sticks from the original country in the suitcase, actually in barrels, because there was no Louis Vuitton suitcase at that time. It was in barrels, everything traveled in barrels, because that stayed wet and protected from the seawater. So why Chenin Blanc became such a success in South Africa? Chenin Blanc is a grape in the Loire Valley that is known to have a high acidity, and South Africa is a warm climate. So what you need to remember is the warmer the climate is, the less acidity you will find in the wine. the cooler the climate is, the more acidity you will find in the wine. Therefore, you needed a grape with a lot of acid at the beginning to handle the warmth of South Africa. Let's do a bit of geography. South Africa, I mean the region of the winelands, Cape Town, Paarl, Stellenbosch, Swartland, we are around the 33rd parallel. To give you an idea, the Loire Valley is on the 47th north. We are 33rd south. So if we put the 33rd on the northern hemisphere, where would we be? We would be in Casablanca. No, not Casablanca in Chile, Casablanca in Morocco. So it's a very warm climate. The only protection we have from the extreme weather that latitude would generate is the cold sea water, the current called Benguela. This Benguela current coming from Antarctica always have cold water that mitigates the high temperature and allows cool nights for the vineyard to have a big amplitude before nighttime and daytime. This is very important for quality of grapes. So Chenin Blanc having a high acidity, it allowed to ripen very well in the warmth of South Africa. As well, Chenin Blanc is a very sturdy grape. It can handle the bad weather of the Loire Valley. It did extremely well in South Africa. And if properly pruned, and if you bring enough water, Chenin Blanc can produce a lot of grapes. And remember, before being winemakers, they are farmers. And for farmers, to make a farmer happy, give him a big crop. So Chenin Blanc can naturally produce a high crop unless you limit it and prune it very short. So the location is a key for Chenin Blanc. As I explained you have the sea, very cold, but like extremely cold. I mean, I'm a surfer, no way I can surf without a complete wetsuit. Water in summer, you go 10 meters deep and you got water at 10, 12 degrees. This is really cold water. While inland, you can have on the same day 40 degrees. The closer you get to the seas, you'll reach 25 degrees, which is much more moderate for the grapes. So you will have a huge variation of the styles of Chenin Blanc produced in South Africa, whether they're coming from a cool climate means close to the sea or high altitude, or from a warmer climate, which is more inland. And let's ask one of my friends who dedicated his life, part of his life, to Chenin Blanc, the winemaker Bruwer Raats from Raats Family Vineyards, that will explain us why Chenin Blanc does so well in South Africa and what can you expect from a South African Chenin Blanc seen from a winemaker's point of view. Welcome, Bruwer.
Chenin Blanc is a bit of a chameleon when it comes to its profile, because you can have Chenin Blanc very mineral, limey, and sort of that great acidity and steeliness to it. But then you can also have Chenin Blanc with almost tropical fruit, yellow fruit, that pineapple, golden, delicious. And in South Africa, we actually have the ability to actually produce both. And so I think that Chenin Blanc has that white fruit and yellow fruit, pineapple, pear, quince sort of fruit, and then it has great mouthfeel. And what I always want, and this is for Chenin Blanc, doesn't matter where it comes from, when it enters your palate, what we call a pear shape. So imagine a pear, but with the narrow part going inwards. Chenin Blanc should come into your palate. It should go wide, and then at the end it should just focus and have that beautiful freshness and minerality. So here you have a wine which has yellow fruit, white fruit. It has the citrus lime minerality element. It has great mouthfeel, but then that beautiful freshness and minerality right at the end.
Chenin Blanc can come in different styles, and there's a reason why in South Africa we have about 17-18% of the total acreage of all vines planted are Chenin Blanc, because they can produce very different style of wines, from MCC, what we call Method Cap Classic, which is the local South African bottle fermented sparkling wine, to dry white wine, to semi-sweet, sweet, up to Noble Late Harvest. Noble Late Harvest is this type of wine that is affected, what we say, by botrytis. Botrytis is this kind of small fungus that is growing on the skin on the berry and allow the water to evaporate, concentrating the sugar and the acidity. That is the same style you find in Sauternes in France, or in the Mosel in Germany when you talk about Trockenbeeren Ausschlesse, or in Tokai when you talk on 506 Asu Putunios Tokai. So this grape can produce a lot. Furthermore, they can produce a lot of base wine that is used for brandy. That's why South African brandies, equivalent of cognac or armagnac in France, are so famous, because Chenin Blanc is a great base to produce world-class brandies. What will you find on a label of a South African Chenin Blanc? You will probably find the cultivar. You know, Chenin Blanc can be blended. Sometimes they blend it with Chardonnay, sometimes they blend it with Colombard, they blend it with Viognier, but very often you will find pure Chenin Blanc. If it says Chenin Blanc on the label and no other grapes, you can be sure that at least 85% of the grape in the bottle is Chenin Blanc. You might find the vintage, and you might find the origin. The origin is very important. South Africa is regulated by the Wine and Spirit Board since 1973, and it's a highly regulated environment, which means every bottle you will find a seal on the bottle that got a unique number. With that number, you can go online and find where this bottle comes from, who's been bottling it, and eventually you can even find which vineyard or which block of vineyards the grapes are originating from, including the year of planting. This is highly regulated, but it's good for the consumer because you know what you will be drinking. However, if it says Stellenbosch on the label, it is 100% Stellenbosch. If it says Swartland, or if it says Elgin, it will be 100% from that origin. We are not allowed to mix the origin, otherwise we'll call that Western Cape or coastal region if the different vineyards where the grapes come from are entitled to the appellation coastal region. So before we make a tour of the different regions of South Africa where you can find Chenin Blanc, I'm keeping in mind that every South African wine producing region produce Chenin Blanc. You find Chenin Blanc everywhere. That's probably the only grape you will find in any region, from the warmest in the Klein Karoo, where most of the time they only produce port, but they can make white port from Chenin Blanc. Chenin Blanc is as well found closer to the sea in cooler climate. But beside the origin, winemakers tend to believe that they are the king and they make the wine they want. Sometimes they believe they are more important than terroirs. I completely disagree with that. The terroir is the key, and Chenin Blanc will reflect the terroir where it's coming from. But the winemaker's got a lot to play. So let's ask Bruwer what he thinks about using wood barrels for the fermentation or the maturation of Chenin Blanc. What do you think, Bruwer?
I think that if I look at Chenin Blanc, not just in South Africa, but if I look at anywhere where I've seen Chenin Blanc, it's a very delicate variety. And, you know, if you look in the Loire, they use wood, not everybody, but it's usually older oak, and it's more about least contact so much than actually wood influence and integration. I think somewhere along the way we lost the plot in the beginning, in that we were making these Chenin Blancs with very high alcohol, low acidity, a lot of new oak, and I think they did not represent Chenin Blanc and what I wanted to see from Chenin. So I think that now, 25 years later, if we look at Chenin Blanc, I think South Africa have changed a lot and realized that it's a delicate variety. If it needs oak, it's a little bit, and not necessarily all of it. Also, I think the use of egg, concrete, and alternative fermentation vessels have helped South African producers to produce wines that's cleaner, fresher, and that have this wonderful mouthfeel still that Chenin Blanc has to offer. There is a place for wood in Chenin Blanc production, but it needs to be done very mindful, not overdo it, and you have to use it intelligently. If you lose the purity, that Chenin, that minerality, that freshness, that bit of citrus and lime, that purity that Chenin Blanc has to offer because of oak influence, then you lost it.
Like I said, you can find Chenin Blanc all around South Africa, whether it's barrel fermented, wooded or not wooded. Chenin Blanc will be found everywhere in South Africa. Let's look at what we can find on a global market, but I'm as well focusing on small producers like Bruwer, but other small producers, because Chenin Blanc offers a great tool for emerging winemaker to identify terroirs and offer the best South Africa can offer. So let's start with the most famous name of the wine among the wine regions of South Africa, Paarl. Paarl has been the center of the industry for decades. For those who know South Africa, in 1918, KWV was a cooperative created to support the market, fix the prices, and kind of regulate everything in the wine industry. They were located in Paarl. At that time, that was the center of the industry. And one of the most famous South African brands is located in Paarl. This is Nederburg. And Nederburg made Chenin Blanc one of their flagship because they believe in the grape. Not only because it's a national flagship, because as well Paarl can produce warmer, more full-bodied, more tropical fruit, riper style of Chenin Blanc, because Paarl is slightly inland, but still having maritime influence, especially in the evening, and the mountain wind to cool down the grapes during the day. So Paarl can offer kind of full-bodied and fairly rich Chenin Blanc. One of the best examples for me is the Nederburg Anchorman. It's a barrel fermented Chenin Blanc, extremely powerful, but at the end you will find all the freshness that Chenin Blanc has to offer, making actually a very balanced wine. It's definitely barrel fermented. You'll have some nuttiness, you'll have some vanilla touch, but it's very, very elegant in the way it's balanced. It's not overpowering. Not expect to find this type of wine that we were producing 20 years ago with far too much wood. Nederburg, the Anchorman, is great food pairing wine because you'll have the body, but you'll have the freshness and all the spiciness that you expect from barrel fermented Chenin Blanc. But Nederburg is extremely famous in South Africa for another wine based on Chenin Blanc. This is the Edelker. Okay, you might not find it all around the world because this is a very rare cuvée that has been created in the 70s by Günter Brotzel, a German winemaker who came to be in charge of Nederburg for years. And that was the first noble late harvest, the first wine, sweet wine, natural sweet wine with botrytis made in South Africa. It's part of these legendary sweet wines from South Africa alongside Vin de Constance. These are always a winner. One of the new regions in South Africa is Elgin. Elgin is located on the east side of Cape Town, but is at the same time higher in altitude. We look at 400 meters altitude, and this is as well close to the sea. So you combine two cooling effects on the grapes, and you will find Chenin Blanc which are much more mineral, almost flinty. I don't say they are thinner on bodies, actually can be extremely bodied. But Spunkop is located in Elgin. The winemaker is Koen Ros. He's a Belgian winemaker. He chose to be in South Africa because he believes specifically in the quality of the terroir of Elgin, combining altitude, complex soil, and freshness. So Spunkop Chenin Blanc, one of my favorite in South Africa. And among the new regions you might have heard about South Africa, one of them is Swartland, which means black land. It's a very poor soil. The soil is sometimes black because they used to farm a lot of wheat, but the soil somehow was too poor in many places for the wheat farmers. And grapes have always been planted in this area, but the farmers stayed extremely poor because the crops was very little, there's very little water, and the soil being very poor, the crop was very small. As a consequence, you find old vines, which is a key for quality, and you find small yields. One of the great ones you can find is David and Nadia Sadi from Swartland. They are not related, but one of the other winemaker you might have heard about is Ibn Sadi, as well from the Swartland. You will find as well Adi Badenhorst and the Mulliner. They are all great wine producers who identify the Swartland as one of the best regions to source old vine Chenin Blanc. In this area, also it's a warm climate. You will find Chenin Blanc which is more mineral, tighter, very long on the palate because of the old vines and the stress these old vines are facing every crop due to the low rainfalls. For Chenin Blanc, however, one of the key regions will always be Stellenbosch. I mean, Brewer selected Stellenbosch, and he will explain us why Stellenbosch for him makes a lot of sense when you choose Chenin Blanc. But you will see a large number of top Chenin Blanc producers have chosen Stellenbosch because Stellenbosch is not a warm climate. It's south of Paarl, which is closer to the sea, makes Stellenbosch slightly cooler than Paarl, and the soils are slightly richer than what you can find in the Swartland. As a consequence, you will have Chenin Blanc with a lot of body, very ripe, but at the same time always keeping the freshness, lemony, that you can combine with some tropical fruit. They are very generous wines. No wonder why consumers love Stellenbosch Chenin Blanc. One of the most famous names and one of the most expensive, you don't expect to find entry-level Chenin Blanc under that label. This is the FMC from Ken Forrester. FMC means Forrester, Minot, who's a winemaker working with Ken Forrester, C for Chenin Blanc. This is the icon of Chenin Blanc. It's barrel fermented, a selection of very old vines from Stellenbosch. This is extremely concentrated. It used to be slightly off-dry due to the power of the wine, but over the last years, Ken Forrester decided to go for a more drier, more Loire-style Chenin Blanc. Beautiful wine. I had the chance to taste wines that are almost 20 years old. They are beautiful. This is a collector's dream. This is one of South African icon. Ken Forrester, FMC, Chenin Blanc. This is a massive wine. Another Chenin Blanc, which is barrel fermented, from Villera. The barrel selected Chenin Blanc is barrel fermented, like it says. And remember, barrel fermenting, means fermented in wood barrel, is not really to bring wood flavors into the wine, but actually to allow working on the lees. What is lees? Lees is when wine ferments, they turn the sugar of the grape juice into alcohol and carbonic gas. These microorganisms are called yeast. It's like when you bake bread, that's almost the same family. When these yeast don't have any more sugar to consume and turn into alcohol, they fall down at the bottom of the tank or at the bottom of the barrel. When they are in the barrel, it is extremely easy to keep control of them or even to move them with a stick. We call that bâtonnage, which means moving the lees inside the wine again, because these lees, these dead yeast, I know dead yeast doesn't sound very good, but it's extremely efficient because when you move them, you extract polysaccharides, which are kind of the family of the sugar that then dilute themselves into the wine, giving the wine more mouthfeel, more creaminess, more butteriness. So this is not for the vanilla you will get from the oak, but more from the richness of the body. Villera, barrel fermented. Villera is as well on the north of Stellenbosch, almost bordering Paarl, so expect something more bodied. But as well, Villera is always great value for money. You will find Villera wines below $20 on the US market, on a many international market. Great value for money, always. One of my favorite is from Vinum. It's Radfordale's winery. You might know the brand under Winery of Good Hope as well. The Vinum Chenin Blanc, as well Stellenbosch, selection of old vines, probably around 35, 40 years old. A lot of lengths, but they are very close to the sea where the winery is located. So you will find some wine fresher, more lemony. You'll get a bit of pineapple on the middle palate, and always green apple, but ripe green apple. Green apple is often the marker of Chenin Blanc. It's, you might not find green apple on all the wines, especially on the riper side of Chenin Blanc. If you go to Paarl, by example, you might find more guava or mangoes than you will find green apple. But in Stellenbosch, that indicates that your vineyard is not far from the sea, therefore is a cool vineyard. Vinum from Radfordale, Chenin Blanc. In Stellenbosch, you will find as well smaller producers. Wade Metzer from Metzer Wine might produce, I think, 3,000 bottles of that cuvée, and a lot of it goes in auction or private clients. So you might not find it all around the world. It's got different cuvée. Metzer Wine, Stellenbosch is this new generation of winemaker who's focusing on terroir and bottling every individual vineyards separately. So gives you a great mosaic of the Rainbow Nation. Stellenbosch, Metzer Wine, very interesting Chenin Blanc if you can get your hand on it. And finally, my friend Bruwer Raats, Chenin Blanc, That's the original, that's entry level, not the old vine. You might find this one below $15 in some market. Great value for money. That's a selection of younger vineyards. Is producing another old vines, Chenin Blanc. Old vines you can keep for, Chenin Blanc is always a grape you can keep for a while. I mean, not keeping to make it survive, but for the wine to improve in the bottle. The original is more on the tropical fruit side, extremely approachable, enjoyable, great value for money, and more production than the old vine, so you have more chance to find this bottle wherever you are.
I think in Stellenbosch we have quite a variety of soil types. We have the sandstone-based soils, and when you grow Chenin Blanc on the sandstone-based soils, which is these deep red soils and yellow soils, a lot of minerals, they got that red color from the iron that oxidize. You make Chenin Blancs, which is slightly low in acidity, but have this wonderful mouthfeel and weight. When you go to Bottleray Hills, the mother soil is granite-based, and then you get that beautiful, what I call whetstone minerality, citrus, lime, wines that are very linear, great focus and precision. From a white point of view, I think our Chenins is definitely standing out from a white variety perspective.
So the question is how to select a great Chenin Blanc for you. When it comes from South Africa, I should say that every price point offers value for money. Because Chenin Blanc is so widely planted, you will find in all regions anything from young vineyards or vineyards producing more quantities, focusing on more tropical fruit, very generous and fresh and enjoyable wine, up to the very old vineyards. We have a program now in South Africa, which is Heritage Vineyards, trying to save this patrimony, this genetic patrimony of one of the oldest Chenin Blanc vines in the world. This program that some of the producers we've been talking about are buying and certifying their vineyards with that program. It's always a sign of quality. So if you see certified by Heritage Vineyard on the label, already you know you face a vineyard that has at least 35 years old and producing a wine that more than likely is fairly high in your range. So at every price point, you will find South African Chenin Blanc that will meet your expectation. And that's probably why our friend Bruwer has been selecting, it's a big choice to only select 2 grapes, one red, one white, when most of the New World producers are still trying to identify what's the best for them. Therefore, they are producing many different type of grapes. Bruwer decided to select Chenin Blanc and Cabernet Franc. Very Loire Valley man. So, Bruwer, explain us, why have you been selecting Chenin Blanc and why do you love it so much?
In 2000, I started Raats Family Wines, and we wanted to specialize in Chenin Blanc and Cabernet Franc. At that stage, South Africa was just allowed back into the international market. And I think the mindset in South Africa was that to produce varieties that are popular and that could easily be accepted in the international market. So Chenin Blanc was very much overlooked. But if you take it that Chenin Blanc has been grown in South Africa for over 350 years and one of the first varieties planted in South Africa, we had more than half of all the Chenin Blanc vines in South Africa, and we produced very little Chenin Blanc, and those Chenin Blancs were cheap, cheerful, off-dry, semi-sweet, and was not considered to be quality. And I looked at Chenin Blanc from the Loire Valley where it originated from, and it's a noble variety. But we took a noble variety in South Africa and changed it into a working donkey. It wasn't a thoroughbred horse. So for me, there was nothing wrong with Chenin Blanc. It was a question of how we treated it in South Africa. So I was from the belief that if we treat Chenin Blanc in the vineyard, planted on the right soil, and treat it in the cellar the same way we do with other quality wine, we can produce some of the best, if not the best, South African white wine.
So you have understood Chenin Blanc from South Africa is definitely a wine you need to try for many reasons, because you will find wines, interesting wine, captivating wine, below €10 or $10 around the world, but as well, you'll find extreme complexity, all vineyards. And this is something that became truly South African. South Africa never tried to copy the style of the Loire Valley. South Africa developed their own expression of Chenin Blanc, riper, less steely, maybe less mineral, which is not necessarily true in all the vineyards, but more accessible as well. You don't have to wait necessarily 5 or 10 years like a great Sauvignon or a great Vouvray before you can actually really enjoy the best of the wines. And we find as well some orange wine. Also, the first orange wine, if I remember well, was made by Scali in 2002 with Chenin Blanc. Chenin Blanc proves to be a great grape when you want to do amphorous fermentation and orange wine and natural wine because of its natural ability to be a stable wine. It gives the winemaker some peace of mind when trying this ancestral method, which are now the great fashion. So enjoy Chenin Blanc from wherever it's coming from in South Africa. You'll always get a great surprise. Thank you for watching me, and let's find a bottle and share it together.